Hello, my name is Jason Clausen, and this little podcast thing I'm doing right here is for the book I just read, named called It by Stephen King, and it was written in 1986. And I'm going to discuss the plot, the setting, some of the characters, the themes, and all that throughout this entire podcast. So sit down, watch, and listen, and here we go. So, the setting where it takes place is in Derry, Maine, which is real. I mean, it's not real. Derry isn't a real town, but it's modeled after a town Stephen King used to live in Maine. And there's a few things in the book that are actually like there in that real town. Like at one point, Paul Bunyan statue comes alive, and that statue's actually a real thing in that town where Stephen King grew up in. That's in Maine. I'm not really sure what the town's name is, but yeah, it takes place in Derry, Maine, and up in Derry, Maine, it's a very it's a rural town, rural town, and a lot of people there, they're just dark and stuff. And the town has a really weird history because like every 27 years something really bad happens there. So every 27 years, a bunch of people die, kids will go missing, a bunch of weird stuff. So that happens every 27 years, and this is because of the next part, which is the next part of this podcast thing is what is it? It is an intergalactic being that isn't really. I wouldn't call it an alien. It's more like the embodiment of evil in the book. It's a weird concept to grasp, and like it doesn't really have a physical form. It's something called the deadlights, which is they're like lights that are like out, and they're like dark energy, and it's like he doesn't really have a physical form, and he also doesn't have a gender. It's not like a he or she. It's weird. That's why it's it. And so basically, this whole time, it is fighting someone called the group called the Losers Club, which contains 7 kids. All right, these 7 kids is William Denbrough, Beverly Marsh, Ben Hanscom, Rishi Tozer, Eddie Kazarak, Mike Hamlin, and Stanley Uris. And these 7 kids, they have to fight it. And basically, their whole thing is they all came together because they were bullied by this dude. He was this older kid in school named Patrick Hochstetter, and he and his group of like bully them all the time. And but like this isn't like regular bullying. Like at one point they try to cut names into this kid's stomach, Ben, but that's like part of the whole problem with Derry, Maine. So, whole plot of the movie, it's very simple. Or not movie, book. Right. Whole plot of the book, very simple. Um, 7 kids, they're fighting it. Um, Ben, Bill's brother dies at the very beginning, and he has a grudge against it, so he is kind of like the leader of the Losers Club. And what happens is they all come together, they have to fight him and stuff, and then they get older and they have to come fight him again. But it's a really weird way how the book does it. So what they do is they start when they're older as adults. So like they are like 30 at this point, because at the end of there's like 2 parts in the new movies, the new adaptations of this book. They have it split in 2 as well. So but they have it split as where it's kids first and adults. But in the book, it's adults, and they have flashbacks to the kids. So they are not always with the adults, are always with the kids. They have flashbacks, and you come to find out that they tried to beat Pennywise. It didn't work. All they did was end his cycle early. They made a blood pact to come back, if he ever came back. So if he does, and then they come back and they have to fight him again. So that's the basic plot of the movie. And I think there's a lot of themes in this book. One of them being that everyone's special in their own way. So, like, you find out through this book that all 7 of the members, they're all different, and they're all bullied really bad, and they all think they're not very special and think that they're just, like, every other kid. So, all that happens, stuff, and throughout the book, um, they realize things about themselves that are very special, like, and they fight back against what's happening, and it's not, no one else does that in this town. Like, moving on to, like, this also connects with the next theme I have, and it's that you shouldn't be complacent with everything that's happening in the world. Like, in this, the adults don't seem to really care about what happens when they're kids. So, what happens, like, at one point, like I mentioned earlier, that Ben was getting his name, Patrick Coxetter's name, carved into his stomach. Well, an adult sees it, and like a lot of adults do, but they just don't care. They just completely disregard it because they don't feel like stepping in, because they're not like good people, I guess you could say. And I just think that one of the themes is like that you shouldn't be doing that. That you should always not be a bystander and all this, and you don't want to like, you don't want to just sit back and let whatever happen. Alright, for this next part, I have a quote from Ben Hanscom that really shows, like, at this point, none of them think they're special. They just think that they're screwed, they're gonna get killed by this clown, and they hate their lives, and they just, like, they don't like any of it. They just don't want to continue, and they're, like, being hunted, and they just hate it. And what Ben Hanscom says, he says, maybe that's why God made us kids first and built us close to the ground, because he knows you gotta fall down a lot and bleed a lot before you learn that one simple lesson. You pay for what you get, you own what you pay for, and sooner or later, whatever you own comes back home to you. And I think this quote really shows how, I guess you could say, lost they were, because they're just thinking, wow, I just want this to end. Maybe I'm going through this hell right now as like a test. It's like a thing I need for the rest of my life. So they're just like really feeling really down at this point. And he says, like, and sooner or later, whatever you own comes back home to you. So, like, if you're not a good person when you're little, and you're not a good person to other people throughout your life, eventually that will come back to you. It's kind of like that old saying, what goes around comes around. So it's like that. So yeah. And I think this this book really shows how human nature is, because it really highlights, because I think in my brain that obviously in this book it is a real thing. Like, it actually exists. It's actually killing people. But I think that Stephen King, when he wrote this book, put it in as a metaphor, because all his whole character is fear. He feeds off fear. So, like, the only way the kids are able to beat him is because they're not scared of him anymore. But that's their whole point. Like, them growing up, their version of growing up was getting over their fears and fighting it. So I think he's a metaphor for what people need to do nowadays, which is you need to stop being scared of things and stop being so frightened to go out of your comfort zone and just get over your fears, because there's going to be things that are bigger than you and stronger than you, and you can't be afraid to step up. So yeah, I think that's how it, like, kind of describes human nature. Alright, well, in conclusion, I think that this book really highlights human nature, and has a really good theme. I think it's a very good book, but it is really long, so if you're up to read it, I would. I read it, and I'm not a big reader, so yeah, I think this book's really powerful, but it is one that makes you think. It makes you think about humans and what we're really here for, and how really everyone has strength. So, thank you very much. This is Jason Clausen signing off. Yeah.